everybody, Pie here, and welcome back to another video. Today we are doing the Redraw challenge. If you don't know what that is, it's where you take an old piece of art and you redraw it. Here on the right you'll see that that's my old drawing, and on the left is my sketch for the new one. Now, the old drawing was a 3-marker challenge, but I didn't want to double up on challenges, so I decided just to take those 3 markers that I used, which you are seeing now, and build my color scheme around those colors, so it is still the same feel. So let's start talking about the piece itself. So for my new piece, what I want to focus on was seeing how I draw now and how I would interpret it now than how I would interpret it then. So what I did was I took note on a piece of paper of what were the key things about the creature that I drew back in 2016. Some key things were like the horns, the nose, the teeth, how the body shape was, and like it had a tail and stuff like that. So then I wrote those down and then flipped my old art piece over so I didn't have it as reference anymore, so I could have less influence of the old piece on me and more influence of my current drawing. So that's how I drew that. And then, of course, I changed things a little bit, so I left it up to my own personal interpretation since I don't remember exactly how things went. The tail ended up curly, and colors ended up a little bit different. And let's talk about colors now. I looked at it again when I was done, obviously, with the sketch to see how it was looking, and I'm like, hey, this looks pretty good. And then for the color scheme, I took note of the main colors, which were E33, B34, and W2, which were a warm gray, an earth tone, and a blue. Now I took note of those colors and built my color scheme around them by finding colors that I had that match those colors similarly, and yeah. And then I stopped looking at the picture. I remembered a few places where colors were, such as the little triangle on the head, and the belly and the arms, and the tail, but I didn't remember exactly where everything was placed. For example, the legs, I totally forgot those were the earth tone when I was coloring, and I made them blue. So that's what I did. I flipped it over when I was drawing, so I had less influence of the old one and more influence of my drawing now. So that's basically my process of that. And I'm actually really happy with how it came out. As you can see now, what I'm doing is I'm laying out shadows and highlights. The shadows worked, but the highlights really didn't do anything, especially when you're covering with a darker color. So it really didn't do much for the piece, but the shadowing did make a little bit difference. But shadowing at the end usually did more because it's not blending into the color because you're overlaying a darker color on top. So it didn't really do much. Probably if I did a darker shadow it might have popped through, but it wasn't that big a deal. It looked cool then. And so my techniques for this one were, for the fur, I wanted to create a furrier texture because before the piece was a lot more flat. So I did that by just adding simple strokes, as you can see, and then you could see the lighter color, but I didn't really like that because it kind of looked messy, so I ended up covering the color for the most part, but then there were some highlights that were still left through, and I just kept layering and layering until I got the furry texture. One tip for furry texture is patience. That's what I learned today, is when you're doing the furry texture, especially on the head, it worked a lot. It worked really well. You let that first layer of hair dry, like these layers dry, and then go over them again with your next color to connect the fur. That's how I did the body as well, which made that give it the texture. Because if you are doing that furry texturing and you're doing it all at once, it's just going to blend together, which is the nature of Copics, is to blend together. So that didn't really work too well unless you had your patience, and that was very difficult for me to actually have patience. For the antlers, I'm actually really happy with how they came out. I'm happy that they are a little more realistic in a sense. I mean, I like the old style of them. I like the form, but I like how they have more interest to them. Before they were just kind of things sticking out of the head, and now they actually have kind of a spot on the face. And definitely there is more dimension to the face. I wish I did a little bit more shading overall to make it more dimensional, because it still kind of looks somewhat flat, but definitely a lot more three-dimensional than before. Now, my inspiration for this creature, I don't really remember how much it was. I know I just wanted to do something random. I wasn't planning on making that a 3-marker challenge, but I was just going to do hey, if I'm doing a 3-marker, actually I did plan it for the 3-marker challenge, but I was like, hey, if I'm doing my own 3-marker challenge, I want something that my colors can complement anything. So I just did a basic creature instead of doing like a person, and you ended up with like a bunch of random purples and stuff. It just wouldn't end well, or yellows. It just wouldn't really make sense with the character. So I did something that would be able to have color, any color work well with it. And I think it did, because I've been really proud of this drawing since that, when I made it, which is in February 18th, 2016, and I'm still super proud of it, and I'm like, well, if I redraw it, will I like it as much? And I actually like the new one better, which is a surprise, because I was so proud of it, and I didn't know exactly how I made something so good, and I was been thinking that up until I drew the new one, and I'm like, wait, I can draw good things still. You just have to set your mind to it and have some little imagination. My feelings about this piece are that I'm really happy with the new outcome. Like, again, I was just talking about how proud I was, and now it's just like the new outcome, it looks really good. I'm really happy with it. And it's so cute. It's just such a little cute creature. If you were wondering what the creature is made up of, there's antlers on it. It's part kangaroo-ish by the chest area with the little hands. It's part bunny with the bunny legs, also kangaroo. Kangaroos kind of have those legs, and it's kind of like a squirrely tail, and then like bunny teeth or squirrel teeth, and then like little fluff. I don't know what that fluff is by, but just kind of cute little fluff. I actually like it. But the cool thing about this piece is there's enough differences that they're different pieces altogether, but there's enough similarities that it looks like the same creature, just better. Like the fluff, it's totally different than the original one, but it actually still looks like the same creature, because I kept those identifiable characteristics like the legs, the antlers, and the teeth. Let's see. Some improvements that I can obviously notice are, again, my shading, but of course that was with 3 markers, but overall my shading definitely improved. Like, I could have used those markers. If I did the 3-marker challenge, and I basically did, I could have used those markers probably a lot better as well, because I know more things about layering. Of course, there is some advantages to this new piece. For example, I used different paper here. So I used a newer paper. I used Bristol board here, and then before I used Copic marker pad, which is not a very good paper for more serious pieces, more for a doodling thing, and I didn't know that when I got it. So the Bristol board works excellent. Additionally to that, I have some advantages as well, as because I did have more markers, so I could do more shading with that. But I remember 2016, if you see some of my old work from then, you'll definitely know that they're different. There's definitely some improvements besides my advantages of more colors and such. Additionally, some other things I'm happy with is how I use my gel pen. Before my gel pen, I was just kind of using it to accent the piece, to make it actually not totally boring and interesting, but I kind of went kind of crazy with my gel pen. Like, the dots on the stomach look okay, it's just kind of childish. The bits on the fingers look good, but on the little triangle piece up top, it was really messy, and on the antlers it was also pretty messy. But on the new one, I used it to accent parts I want to be accent, so I used like joints I accented, and you'll see that more towards the end of the video. Right now you can see I'm just coloring it in. We're going to look more real time. If you saw earlier, I was using my 0 Copic blending marker. It's basically I use that because, you know, like all 4-year-olds, I cannot color in the lines. I'm not a 4-year-old, but I can't color in the lines very well. So when I do go out of the lines, I use my colorless blender, and I can push the marker back into the line and pick it up, so it's not as bold as it was before, or it's gone altogether. So that's what I used that for. And I used some cool tricks in here later on. I used the colorless blender to transfer a marker color between the markers by connecting the tips of a darker marker to the colorless blender, or the colorless blender to the darker marker, so then it lightens the color and you can get an in-between tone without actually having that specific Copic marker that is that in-between shade you're looking for, which I found very convenient when I was shading the fluff, because I wanted it to have a shadow, but I didn't want it to have a dark shadow, so I used my W2, but I don't have anything lighter than the W2 that's still warm. I don't have like W1, so I had to use my colorless blender for that. Usually this is seen to how your style changes. I don't really have a particular style at the moment because my art journey is still developing, but I just kind of went with what I've been doing recently. I felt what I thought would look nice. Here's that colorless blender thing on screen that I was talking about. I didn't really have a style back then because I don't do crazy animals all too often. I've been doing a lot of people recently, and I really like doing animals, so maybe I'll do more animal creatures like that in the future. But as far as style goes, you can see that I have more anatomy skill. Not too much like your professional artist, but I have more anatomy skill with making it less flat. Like before, his face is just kind of flat and then his body's the other way. Now you have some curvature and to the face and everything like that. Let's see what else we got. My adventure through art in the past year. 2015 was December 2015 is when I started wanting to take art more seriously. Ever since 5th grade, I've always drawn my whole life, and I've always, enjoyed it, but I didn't really, go intense drawing. I had a little sketchbook when I was in 4th grade, at the end of 4th grade, but I didn't really, draw all too often or use fancy art supplies. I didn't really have much or anything. I had, basic child supplies, but nothing too intimidating. But then 2015, was when I started wanting to make my art more serious because of my art class in 6th grade I had, which really inspired me. So I got, for Christmas, I got a bunch of paints and such like that, and I started my art journey as well. And then I got Copics later. I might have got Copics that year, but I think it was 2016 that I got my first Copics. Yeah, 2016 was probably my first Copics. And that's when I started my Copic journey, because who inspired me for that was Bailey J. If you don't know, she's a Copic primarily YouTuber, but she's an art YouTuber. I started watching her. She was probably the first art YouTuber that I watch, and she was literally amazing to me. I like her old work better personally, but I still check in every once in a while to see her newer content. But she taught me the ways of Copics, and I was like, I'm in love with Copics. Now, you might be thinking, well, wouldn't you want to start with something less expensive, not as pricey, not maybe as high quality, and start with something like cheaper alcohol-based markers? And I was like, that might be smart, but I know I want Copics. People are like, what if you don't like them? Oh, I knew I was going to like them just from watching the video. And that was a big chance to take, and it was a chance that I'm very happy I took, because I use Copics all the time. I've just grown my collection, and I love them, and I've never really had any doubts about my extreme purchases. So Copics, and that's been my journey. So ever since 2015, so it's 2017 now, so for about 3 years I've been taking art a lot more seriously almost. And I've done a lot of art, and I just don't show it on the camera because that's a lot of effort. So we're coming to a closure here, and you can just see me adding my file details and highlights. If you're wondering what supplies I use other than Copics, I used my Uniball gel pen. It is by Signo. It is probably the best gel pen out there, better than the Jelly Roller, in case you were wondering. As well, I used Copic multiliners for the inking. I used a light box to trace my sketch onto the bigger paper. My Copic multiliners I used in brown and black for the eyes. I could have used micron pens for the eyes, but I really like my Copic multiliners when I'm doing Copic work. And all that fun stuff. I'm not going to tell you specifically what colors I use, because there's a lot of colors I used on this piece, so I apologize. But again, they're all based around that color, so the 3 colors, so I bet you could get a general idea. It doesn't have to be exact, but if you're trying to recreate something. So I hope you all enjoyed this video here. If you want to see more things like this, just let me know in the comments, yada yada yada, yada yada yada. So thank you all so much for watching. And right now I'm just doing some finishing touches, like I already said. Thank you so much for watching. I'm going to say it the 4th time. And I hope you all enjoy and continue on your own art adventures. And right in a minute, I'm going to end the video, but I need to get in. Alright, here we are. Here's the close-up of the little creature thingamajig. Close-ups on the thing. And then after this, there's going to be side-by-side view of the 2 drawings. So thank you all so much for watching. Goodbye!